Ouch, you're biting my ear. Hi friends, welcome to our channel. I'm Juan and these are my two green cheek conures, Pineapple and Pumpkin. So if you're thinking about getting a bird and you've never had one before, this video is for you. We're going to be talking about 7 things you should consider before getting your first parrot, and hopefully by the end of this video you'll have a better understanding of whether a parrot is the right companion for you. So the first thing that we're going to be talking about is commitment. Parrots are one of the many animals that can live for quite a long time if they're given the proper care and nutrition, and also depending on the species. Small to medium birds can live anywhere to be 10, 15, or 20 or more years, and larger— you're biting my skin! Stop! Please. Thank you. Larger parrots can live to be 50, 75, or even 100 years in some cases. That is a pretty long time. Let's say you're 20 years old now, and you're still biting my nail. Okay, so let's say you're 20 years old now and you're thinking about getting a macaw, which has an average lifespan of about 50 years and potentially a little longer if you give it everything it needs to be happy and healthy. You do the math. You're basically going to be old. It does sound fascinating to have a pet that you can basically grow old with, but with age comes big life changes, deteriorating health, unpredictability, and then eventually death. Yes, death. Well, we all knew that anyway, right? So you would need to think about who's going to care for your parrot if you're gone or when you're gone, and if something were to happen to you where you can't take care of them anymore. Parrot care takes tons of commitment, and if you want to get one, you have to be committed to giving them the best care that they need for years to come and even after you're gone. And not only can parrots live for quite a long time, they're still considered wild animals, and that's because if you compare it to dogs and cats, which have been domesticated and selectively bred for thousands of years, you'll get all these favorable traits like obedience and a lot of other things. Parrots are only a few generations removed from the wild, so they're still going to have a lot of their natural tendencies and behaviors, which we'll talk about later on in this video. Moving on to number 2, intelligence. There are a lot of animals that have intelligence levels comparable to us, like apes, dolphins, elephants, and even parrots. Parrots are both incredibly smart and emotional animals, and it's said that they have an IQ similar to that of a toddler's. So you're basically signing yourself up to care for a toddler for 10 or more years. Right, Pumpkin? Yeah. And they're also monogamous animals. No, don't bite my band-aid. Don't bite my band-aid, please. No. She got my band-aid. Oh, here, you want to feed Penny? There, yep. This is happening. Okay, finished? Nope. Can I talk? This isn't gonna work. Okay, thank you. They're also monogamous animals, and they can form really strong bonds with their owners, and in some cases, depending on the parrot's personality, this is happening. There's a chance that a parrot's going to prefer being with one person over anyone else. So essentially, if they form that strong bond with you, they're basically going to see you as their mate. So if you live with family or a significant other— oh no, don't fight. Okay, so if you live with family or a significant other, there's a chance that they might not form that bond with you, and they're going to form it with someone else that you live with, and that's something you might not be able to change. My birds flew away, but yes. Anyway, and because they're so smart, parrots are going to need a lot of mental stimulation just like you and I do. Otherwise, we're all going to go crazy. We have things like books, entertainment, social media, and a bunch of other things to keep us mentally stimulated, so parrots are going to need a bunch of things like we do to keep them happy as well. So these things are going to include playing with lots and lots of different toys, trick training, and playing and bonding time with you. And if you happen to get a parrot that is really territorial over you and they chose you as their person, there's a high chance that they might not like to interact with anyone else but you. So you're going to really have to be committed to giving them the time and attention that they need to keep them happy. Parrots would need a minimum of 3 to 4 hours of undivided attention, and sometimes 3 to 4 hours isn't enough for most birds. So the more time and attention that you can give them, the better. Parrots are not like dogs and cats where you can just play with them for a little bit and then you could leave them alone to do their own thing, because they are flock animals and it's really rare to see a bird in the wild by themselves. And did I mention that they're really smart? All that intelligence packed inside that little brain means that they could get into things that they're not supposed to and things that are dangerous to them, so you are going to need to supervise them. Oh, Pumpkin, you wanna come here? Come to mommy? Okay, wanna be in the video? Thank you. If you're not willing to give them the time and attention that they need, like let's say you just leave them in the cage all day with just the bare necessities like food and water and a few toys, and you don't interact with them at all, which is quite cruel, and it's basically like locking them in a prison cell, which is not what you want to do. What's going to happen is the parrot is going to suffer, and then they're going to start developing behavioral problems. They're most likely going to self-mutilate, and that could include things like plucking their feathers, which most of the time never grows back, especially if they are constantly plucking feathers that are trying to grow back in. They might even bite their skin and their feet, and there's a chance that they could either die from all that stress or just basically go insane. And because they're such emotional animals, they could even start throwing tantrums and squawk until your ears bleed. Well, obviously that's not what's gonna happen, but that's what it's going to feel like. Then it's going to lead to unwanted behavior like aggressive biting, which we'll talk about later on in this video. And then when you can't handle all those tantrums, you're eventually going to want to give them away. And then that's going to be really traumatizing for your bird, especially if they see you as their mates. Not only are they going to be traumatized, they might even lose trust in you or humans in general. And once you lose a bird's trust, it's really hard to gain that back. Yeah. Number 3, noise. Dogs bark, cats meow, and birds, of course, squawk. So not only are birds going to squawk when they're agitated, they're naturally noisy, so they're going to be chirping their little heads off almost every day and regularly. We are having chat time. You're on the camera. See me. So parrots chirp for a lot of reasons. They chirp to talk to you, or when you talk, when they want something, or just because they feel like it, or maybe they're startled by something, and that's not something you can train them not to do. Parrots are naturally noisy, and depending on the species, they can be quite loud as well. So in the wild, they live in large forests or jungles, and they need to be able to communicate with each other. Now, there definitely are some parrot species that are not as loud, like green cheek conures, but it doesn't mean that they're not going to be noisy ever. But just know that parrots are always going to chirp and make noises. So if you appreciate your peace and quiet, then parrots are probably not the right pet for you. And if you live in a small apartment or you live really close to your neighbors, that is something that you'll need to take into consideration if the noise is going to be a problem to them or anyone else that you live with. Moving on to number 4. Not only is chirping natural bird behavior, but biting is also something that you'd have to be able to accept. So parrots bite for a number of reasons. They use their beaks as a way to explore things around them. They use it as a third leg to climb up things. Other than chirping, they also use it as another way to communicate. Parrots will bite if they're being defensive, if they're angry, if they're trying to get your attention and they want you to do something, or maybe you did something that they didn't like touching their food or their toys. I'm talking to you, Pinny! Birds also tend to bite more often when they're really hormonal, and this usually happens during the springtime. So this happens because springtime is mating season and they're going to bite a lot because it's their way of releasing their urges, which is completely normal, and this is something that you're going to have to get used to. So if you can't tell, they bite for a number of reasons, and depending on the bird species and the individual bird, sometimes when they bite, it's going to hurt a lot, and sometimes it can even draw blood and cause scarring. Ah! They're biting me now! Stop! Ouch, ouch. Ouch. That's my band-aid. I hurt my finger. Basically, the larger the beak, the more damage that they can do. And remember earlier I said that they bite as a way to explore things. Well, they can basically destroy anything that they can get their little beaks on. My birds have destroyed desk chairs, furniture, one of my favorite purses, clothes, and a number of other things. Number 5, other pets and children. Because parrots bite, they're probably not the best pet to have for your children, and if it's your first time owning a bird. I wouldn't even recommend getting any pet for your children, especially if it's just for show and if you're not going to care for it properly. Believe it or not, a lot of parents just go to the pet stores and they end up getting a pet that their kid thinks is cute. That does happen to birds quite often. Ends up happening is they'll go home and then they'll have no idea of how to care for the pet. Parrots can bite your children's fingers. Children could also be really rough with the bird and end up hurting it, and it's just overall not a pretty picture. Some parrots can get along really well with children, and that's entirely depending on their individual personalities, and that's just not something that you can tell right off the bat. So not only do you have to think about your children, but you also have to think about what other pets that you have at home. So if you have a cat or a dog, you wouldn't be able to tell if they're going to get along without them being in the same room together. Also, cat and dog saliva, or just mammal saliva, contains a lot of bacteria that is harmful to your birds. If a cat or a dog bites them, their wounds are going to get infected and they could potentially die. So if you do have cats or dogs or any type of animals that could prey on parrots, you're going to need to be able to supervise them really closely when they're out together, and sometimes you might not even be able to keep them in the same room together. Number 6, mess. So parrots are relatively clean animals in a sense that they're not smelly. They actually have this really intoxicating smell that's pretty addicting, so once you smell a bird, there is no going back. In terms of creating messes, parrots are really messy, especially when they're eating, playing with toys, and when they're molting and shedding their feathers to grow new ones. Also, depending on the species, some birds create more dust than others, like cockatiels and African greys. In the wilds, the whole forest or jungle is the parrot's home. So they can just eat fruit or vegetables on top of a tree and then just fling it everywhere when they're done, or just drop it to the ground. It's basically what they're going to do in your homes. Other than creating messes with their food and their toys, parrots also poop on average every 15 to 20 minutes. That's a lot of poop. So you'd have to be okay with cleaning up more often than usual, and be okay with them pooping everywhere, because accidents are going to happen. When they gotta go, they gotta go. Just like dogs and cats, they can be potty trained, but that's going to take lots of effort and time to get them to learn how to do that. Last but not least, number 7, money. Owning a parrot is not cheap. Not cheap. Just like with every other pet, there are going to be 2 types of expenses: one-time purchases and reoccurring purchases. One-time expenses would include anything like a good quality cage that is rust-free, a play stand, natural purchase, stainless steel food bowls, a food scale, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and also a carrier to be able to take them to and from the vet and to put them in case of emergencies where you have to evacuate your home. And then reoccurring purchases include pellets, fresh fruits and vegetables, some seeds, lots and lots of toys, beak and nail trimming, especially if that's not something you're comfortable doing at home. Also, the controversial topic of flight feather trimming, which we can talk about in another video. And last but not least, vet bills. So you're going to need to take your parrot to the vet once a year, because they're also really good at hiding their illnesses. So taking them to the vet once a year is a health precaution. So I've read and heard a bunch of stories about parrot owners waking up one day and finding their bird at the bottom of the cage lifeless, or they find out that their bird is sick, and by the time they take their bird to the vet, it's a little too late to do anything to help. Most of the time, owners never see these things happen, so it really is important to take them to the vet for yearly checkups. I mentioned a food scale earlier as one of the one-time purchases, and that is because another way to see if your bird is sick is to weigh them first thing in the morning. Another sign that a parrot is sick is when they lose a significant amount of weight, and then when you notice a change, you could take them straight to the vet to get them checked up. Usually, the bigger the parrot, the more expensive things tend to be, so that is something you're going to have to keep in mind. And also, all the expenses I mentioned are not a complete list of things, so that's also another thing that you have to keep in mind. So for a recap, you're going to need to make a commitment for 10 or more years to a messy, incredibly smart and emotional, wild, inexpensive animal that might not get along with you or other pets and children. I know I made it seem like parrots are really difficult pets to have and that you shouldn't get them, but they make really amazing pets that just need a lot more care and attention than your average cat or dog. So if you're still unsure of whether a parrot is the right pet for you, I recommend watching Parrot Confidential. Parrot Confidential is a documentary about how birds are basically hardwired for the wild and how humans brought them into their homes, not knowing how much work it really takes to care for parrots. So you'll also see owners and rescuers share their own stories and also the pros and cons about owning parrots. I highly recommend you watch this documentary, especially if you're the type of person that's thinking, hey, it's just a parrot, right? How hard can it be? Those are the 7 things that you should consider before getting your first bird, and hopefully this will give you a better understanding of how much work actually goes into parrot ownership and whether a parrot is the right pet for you. Let me know what you think of this video, and if you'd like more educational videos like this, let me know down in the comments below. below what you'd like to see in the future, and if you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. For experienced bird owners, if you're watching this, let me know down in the comments below as well if you think I forgot something. Please share your own parrot experiences as well, just so other people can get a better understanding of what it's really like owning a parrot. Hello, I'm Pumpkin. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you get notified every time we post a new video. Thank you for watching. Thank you.